Recently, it was revealed that in 2024, Pokémon Go generated the least amount of in-app purchase revenue since 2017. Now, there's a lot of different thoughts that I have regarding this new fact, and I do want to talk about it here in this video. Hey, how's it going everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go discussion video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. Alright, so recently on the website Statista, which is a website that tracks the revenue of games like Pokemon Go, they showed that Pokemon Go generated the least amount of revenue since 2017. It's actually pretty bad if you look at these numbers. It seems like they only made about $544 million, which is actually not a small number if you actually think about it. But if you compare it to COVID numbers, where they had remote raid passes in the game, it's basically about half the amount of revenue from in-app purchases. And I think the reaction to this is not exactly what you would expect. I think a lot of players are actually defending Niantic, and I think rightfully so, because when it comes to Pokemon Go, there's a lot of things that players may not consider when they're looking at something like this, and I think it's important that we point it out. Now, if we were to base this as the state of Pokemon Go, yeah, it might be a little bit concerning, considering that in the past, they were able to generate so much more revenue with a lot of in-app purchases, and it really shows with a lot of the things that they've been doing in Pokemon Go as of late. There's just a lot of players that I talk to who just do not buy anything in Pokemon Go. And I think a big reason for that is because when they look at the bundles that Niantic offers and when they look at the price of, let's say, remote raid passes or even premium raid passes, it just seems like it's getting way too expensive, and Niantic is getting a lot more egregious with their monetization. So I do think that a drop in revenue is to be expected. I think a lot of players who are typically spending a lot of money are no longer spending any money because they just feel like it's not worth it. And then of course, as a lot of veteran players have been playing the game, they already have access to a lot of legendaries, and it may not necessarily be that beneficial for them to continue raiding those legendaries. So I can understand like that would contribute to a drop in revenue as well. But I actually do think that this is all very deceptive. I actually think that all of these stats from Statista do not actually reveal what is exactly going on. And I do not think that Pokemon Go is in any danger. I do think maybe there was a drop in revenue, but I don't think that it's as drastic as a lot of people might think it is. In fact, I will say that Pokemon Go is probably doing really well. I think it's actually doing very healthy. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to these stats, they do not account for a lot of different things. For example, they do not account for Pokemon Go Fest, Go Tour, and Wild Area event tickets. That's something that a lot of players purchase directly from Niantic. And considering that every single one of those events tend to sell out, and they're very expensive with all the different add-ons and different things like that, I do think they generate a ton of revenue from those live in-person events. And of course, they may not necessarily be tracking the global ticket sales as well, and those actually sell really well. I do think that when it comes to the Wild Area event, it was just full of a lot of people at the places that I went to. And I do think that for that is not going to be reflected in this statistic. Another thing you also have to consider is that Niantic launched the web store a couple of years ago, and those purchases are not going to be reflected in this data. And that's very important because when it comes to the web store, that's basically where you're going to find the best deals for Pokecoins and as well as some bundles as well. So I think a lot of players are going to opt to buy their Pokecoin purchases directly from the web store. And of course, that's not all going to be tracked as in-app purchases. So yeah, I do think that this data is very deceptive. It's not going to reveal the full picture, but it might give you a bit of a snapshot at how players might be feeling, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of players who are still going to make their purchases from the game itself. And if that number is going down, then maybe it does reflect a little bit of a revenue drop. But I do not think it's as drastic as this data suggests. I think that's something we do need to keep in mind when we think about how much money Niantic is making and whether or not Pokemon Go is in a good place. So with all of this said, let's say that the drop in revenue is drastic. I mean, Niantic did do a lot of layoffs after COVID, and I think a big reason for that is because they were not making the amount of money that they were making during the pandemic period. And yeah, there is a possibility that we might see further layoffs, or we might see a lot of cuts and setbacks when it comes to Pokemon Go's development. And what are the things that Niantic could do to mitigate that? What are some of the ways that Niantic could generate revenue for Pokemon Go? Well, I think one thing they need to do is think about player feedback. If there's a lot of things that players want with Pokemon Go, I think it's time that they start listening to a lot of that feedback and actually consider implementing a lot of that stuff. I mean, for what it's worth, Niantic has been making a lot of positive changes as of late, and I do think that if they continue onward with a lot of those positive changes, then they're going to see a lot more increases in revenue because players are going to feel like their money is actually worth spending when it comes to Pokemon Go. I think when it comes to certain features, if Niantic were to monetize it in a way that's not egregious, then I think a lot of players will actually engage with it. I mean, we're going to be getting a brand new item with the Go Tour event this year. It's going to be that Lucky Charm thing. It's going to trigger lucky trades with friends. I think there's a lot of potential with that. I think a lot of players might actually spend money in order to get those. And those are some of the things that Niantic could do to actually create a lot of revenue for Pokemon Go. Implement a lot of special items that give you something that's really difficult for you to do, and if they were to monetize it and give players the option to pay for something rather than spend an egregious amount of time doing it, then I think some players will actually buy it. That's kind of a reality when it comes to most mobile games, especially the free-to-play games. When it comes to spending money in Pokemon Go, it should really come down to being a time sink. Like, that's what you're spending. Like, you're spending money instead of time. That should be the exchange. But when it comes to Pokemon Go, it's kind of like you're paying money for another go at a slot machine. I think when it comes to raids, when it comes to hatching eggs, that's mainly the stuff that is monetized in Pokemon Go. And yeah, a lot of players will continue to do a lot of raids because they want to get perfect IVs, they want to get shinies, maybe even shundos, and because of that, raiding is essentially evergreen content. So I think this is the area that Niantic needs to keep in mind, that if they're going to be monetizing raiding, then they need to give players a lot more value out of raiding. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of like my friends who just completely stopped raiding in Pokemon Go because they just feel like their money is not worth it. So yeah, hopefully for 2025, Niantic makes some positive changes, because when it comes to Pokemon Go, I think there's a lot of things that they did that I just do not agree with. And at the same time, I think when it comes to revenue, it's kind of a touchy subject. It's something that Niantic needs to balance really well. If they go way too far in egregious monetization practices, then players are just simply not going to care about the game anymore. And if they do something and of course, if they swing the pendulum too far to the other side and make the game way too free-to-play friendly, then not a lot of players are going to spend money, and that's going to hamper their ability to actually develop this game. So it really is that fine line that they need to walk, and I really hope they do it well in 2025, because when it came to 2024, I felt like they swung it way too far into the egregious territory, and I think for 2025, they need to bring it back to a more balanced state. I think they are fully capable of doing it, and if they do, then they're going to generate a lot of revenue for Pokemon Go. And then of course, if they want to create a lot of revenue, obviously the big thing that they could do is unnerf remote raids. I think that would be the biggest thing for them to do. But I totally understand that for them, they're probably going to double down on that, and they're probably never going to do it. I feel terrible about that, but it's kind of a reality based on all the conversations that I've had with Niantic developers. But yeah, that's besides the point. This is something I just wanted to talk about. I think when I saw this Reddit post, there has been a lot of discussions regarding it, and I think it's important that we do not take a lot of these stats and data points at face value, because there's going to be a lot more things happening behind the scenes that players need to understand. And yeah, with that said, that's essentially going to be it for this video. I would love to know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. What are your thoughts regarding this data? And do you agree with me that it does not reveal everything that might be going on? But at the same time, do you feel like there has been a revenue drop? How has your spending been when it comes to Pokemon Go? I know for myself, I've gone completely free to play aside from special events like Go Tour and Go Fest. And I think for a lot of players, they've kind of followed suit. They do not spend money in the game. And I want to know your reasons why. Do you feel like it's because of some of Niantic's decisions, or do you just feel like you're just kind of bored with the game and you just do not feel compelled to spend money, definitely share the reasons in the comments below and let's have a great discussion. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I'm completely done blabbling at this point, but if you enjoyed my blabber when it comes to this topic, then make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And real quick, let me give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Content channel, the absolute best way you could do that is by joining my Patreon. And if you become a paid Patreon member, you get the benefit of getting a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. So when it comes to stuff like remote raids and the friendship system, if you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to interact with me in a different way, if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you could always do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow, and you'll have access to some exclusive content, and you'll be able to catch up on my daily life. And that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.